There's an adage in the U.S. Marines, which is that no plan survives the initial encounter with the enemy.
But now it's clear to me, we've been talking about this for 6 years now.
Hello and welcome to Root Causes, the PKI and Security podcast where a pair of industry veterans talk about all matters digital certificates and PKI. We're here at Toronto Sessions Season 3. I'm Tim Callan, Chief Experience Officer at Sectico, and of course, I'm here with Jason Sirocco, Senior Fellow at Sectico. So, Jay, I just recently got back from the PKI Consortium PQC conference that occurred in January of 2025. And there was a term that I heard used several times by presenters that, first of all, I love, and second of all, I thought would be really nice to bring to the attention of the audience, which is protocol ossification.
Whenever I hear that term ossification used with respect to computer systems,
Right.
It's typically because there's things, dependencies and things built on and assumptions that are made about the way a thing has to work, which then causes it not to be able to be flexible.
Yeah. So ossification in a general sense is taking something that should be pliable and flexible and basically turning it to stone, making it rigid and locked in. And in the case of protocol ossification, what these folks are talking about is a protocol will have a certain range of allowed use cases or motion. And what can happen is, though the protocol allows that certain range, you can find that there are portions of it that if you actually try to use it that way, you break things. So think about it this way. Let's suppose that I've got an interoperable system and there are 7 ways you're allowed to do the following thing. But let's suppose that 99% of the people out there are using ways 1 through 3. It is very possible for someone to write software that actually can't use 4 through 7 correctly. And they could write that software because they're not aware of it or because they just don't care. Maybe they're trying to save some space, And so if you look at this protocol and you say, aha, number 5, this is exactly what I want. We're going to go do that. And just to give people a little flexibility, we'll let them choose 6 or 7 also. And you could write to something that fits the protocol, but when you try to implement it in the real world, things break. That is protocol ossification.
That's great, Tim. How about give us a real-world example?
So it's come up in the context of PQC. Because PQC, when you look at protocols, there are certain things that are laid out. And it's things like timeout periods. Someone looks at the protocol and says, oh, I can fit this all in the timeout period. We're fine. Yes, it's bigger than it was before, but it's still inside of the timeout period. Great. All is great. And people, oh, it's great. And they move forward. And then they put it in the real world and they find out that stuff's timing out and connections are being lost and we can't get our data packets through. And it turns out because we're running into timeout limits. And you can say, well, those are the wrong timeout limits, dummy. It's not what the protocol says. But that doesn't really matter because when it's out employed on thousands of software packages that are being used by hundreds of thousands of organizations around the world, you standing on top of a hill shouting, you're all dummies, doesn't fix the problem, right? So this came up, So one of the people I know who said it, was presenting on stage, was somebody from Cloudflare who was talking about this real thing. We took it and we rolled it out and all kinds of stuff broke. And the basic reason is protocol ossification, right?
A loss of flexibility.
Yeah. And this is being uncovered as a very real, very meaningful challenge to real world PQC rollout. because stuff that is supposed to work according to the protocols isn't necessarily working. Goes back to we did an earlier episode where we talked about known unknowns and unknown unknowns. That's an unknown unknown, right?
Right.
And then finally you discover it, and it goes into a known unknown. And goes back to an earlier episode we talked to both Bas Vesterban and Michaela Mosca about the importance and the value of getting real-world feedback on this stuff, because we can all look at protocols and say, this will all work. And then you start using it, and suddenly you're finding it isn't working because of things you just weren't aware of, such as protocol ossification.
Right on.
Right. So what do we do about this?
That's a good question.
Right? It is a good question. I think part of what we do about this is exactly that, which is we start using the stuff. In another earlier episode, you and I talked about the Apple step-down process, and it's very similar, right? What it's supposed to do is, because it steps down in phases, it's supposed to discover problems that happen when you go to 6-month certs, or problems that happen when you go to 3-month certs, before everybody just rushes to 1-month certs. And so you get a similar thing here, I think, where we start using these PQC algorithms. Or this could be any big change, right? It doesn't have to be PQC. It's just the one people were talking about at that conference. You take these PQC algorithms and you start using them, because what we're discovering here ultimately is deviations from published standards that are commonplace, or commonplace enough that they're problematic, right? And then, to some degree, market forces fix it, right? If my router won't do what it's supposed to according to the rules, and that thing is now necessary, and my competitor's router will, then what's happening is my customers will vote with their wallets, and that'll get my attention in an awful hurry, and suddenly I will de-ossify my use of that protocol, right?
Exactly, Tim.
Yeah. So the trouble with this stuff is it takes time. It's hard to hurry it up. It requires participation of many, many, many different parties who don't even necessarily talk to each other, who aren't always even aware of where these protocols are written down. They just do what they've always done. They just do what everybody else does. And it's just a major herding cats kind of exercise.
Technologies like that.
Yeah. Yeah, especially interoperable technology.
So, I didn't think I'd have this thought at the beginning when you first brought up this topic. But now it's clear to me. We've been talking about this for 6 years now.
Yes. Isn't that crazy?
And one of the terms that you and I quite commonly use for this is we say, with PQC, it has been time to get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
For a long time now.
Yeah.
We've been saying that for 6 years. I'm really pleased to say that the company that we work for is in the middle of releasing a PQC sandbox where you can actually see and smell and touch and hear a post-quantum certificate.
Good.
And so that's the first step of getting your hands dirty, is seeing what it looks like and how it operates, even just the latency of the creation of it. It tells you a lot of information. And there's a second thought to this, Tim, and one of the themes in the objections to moving forward to PQC, one of the objections to moving forward with automation or certificate lifecycle management is, there's going to be problems, so we can't do that. And, we've now had multiple podcasts where we've talked about Apple's intentions, Google's intentions. You're going to have to move forward and deal with the problems that come up, including things that are known and unknown. Yeah. We've said this now on multiple podcasts. And I think that what you're just saying, imagine, it's like you've just got to go and do the thing.
Right.
In order to discover where the problems are and then know how to deal with them.
Yeah.
so many people who sit at the command line for a living are of the opinion, well, there's going to be problems.
Right. There's an adage in the U.S. Marines, which is that no plan survives the initial encounter with the enemy. And in this case, the enemy is software errors, right? So we can sit and we can plan and plan and plan and plan and plan and plan and plan some more. That's what we've been doing. But when we get in there and encounter the enemy and we start putting this stuff in the field, that's where we're going to discover the shortcomings of our plans.
There's going to be plenty.
Yeah, but there's just no way to get it otherwise. And I think that's a big thing. I think a protocol can be deossified if the need is sufficient, right? And it's how occurs the way that we just talked about. And I think in this case, some of it will be because the need for PQC is not going to stop being there. Sometimes maybe there's range in a protocol that we don't need and we don't care about, and there's no forcing function to deossify that. And maybe in that case, that's fine, right? Like if it's honestly redundant, if it's an appendix and we'd be better off without it, then maybe we just should not have it. And that's okay. But I think when we're seeing real world problems really occurring, like we are with implementations of PQC, that's where we've got to go back and say, okay, listen, this corner you cut, whether you knew it or not, Mr. Software Developer, yeah, I know you got away with it for the last 15 years and good for you, but it's time to put it on the roadmap and get it fixed proper.
Never thought I'd be saying it again. It is time to get your hands dirty. And and this is the reasons why. Thanks, Tim.
All right. Thank you, Jason. This has been Root Causes.